Welcome to Journeys with the No Schedule Man, exploring authentic stories of personal growth and lessons learned from people living true to themselves with creativity, passion, and purpose. For all past episodes, subscribe at iTunes or visit noscheduleman.com. And please connect, share, and contribute with a comment, rating, or review. And now, here's your host, the No Schedule Man, Kevin Bulmer.
I've been known to struggle with reality. Not that it is any real mystery.
The big question this week is, what's really stopping you? What is it really that's holding you back from doing the things that you want to do and living the life that you want to live? Today you're going to hear from somebody unstoppable. That's who she is. That's how she is, and it's how you're going to feel after you listen to her. Welcome. I'm Kevin Bulmer. This is Journeys with the No Schedule Man, where we explore conversations on personal and professional growth, authentically sharing in an effort to empower each other. Wherever you might be on your path, I truly appreciate you being here, and I hope you'll find this helpful. You can find all the past episodes of this podcast on iTunes, on Stitcher, YouTube, Libsyn, and in the United States on iHeartRadio and Google Play Music. All of the archived episodes are also easy to find at noschedulemanpodcast.com. If you like this, I hope you'll subscribe and stay the course with us, and please do share it with someone else and invite them to come along. Now, back to the idea of being unstoppable. Quick story before I tell you about today's guest. Years ago, I read a book called The Magic of Thinking Big by a guy named David J. Schwartz. I had picked it up at the suggestion of last week's guest, Kevin O'Hara of Alcohol Mastery. One of the first things in that book is a section on what Schwartz calls excusitis. He hits you right in the face, like right at the beginning of that book, The Magic of Thinking Big, asking you what areas of your life you're using as an excuse. Like, for instance, your health, your job, your relationships, your upbringing, your environment, your finances, your parents, your spouse, all of those kinds of things. Excuses. And when I read that, I remember it being a really sobering experience to realize how many things that I had to admit to myself I was hiding behind, never really coming anywhere close to what I always thought my full potential might be as the days and the weeks and the months continued to slip away. That idea of excusitis hit me right between the eyes as I got really honest with myself, and I realized that I was going to need to change my mindset on a lot of different issues. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to warn you right now. Today's guest might very well have the effect of making you take a very hard look at yourself and the excuses that you might be making. If you want to continue listening to your own excuses and self-limitations, turn this off. You're not going to like it. But if you're at the point, like me and like where I was certainly, and still am to an extent right now, the point of trying to really embrace your authentic self and to challenge yourself to live life on your own terms and in the best manner possible, whatever that might mean to you, then this conversation is going to seriously charge you up. Unstoppable Tracy Schmitt is an award-winning leader, humanitarian, advocate, decorated athlete, and international speaker. Well, she's now adding author to her long list of incredible accomplishments. Her upcoming book is called Unstoppable You: Exceed Uncertainty, Embrace Possibilities, Earn Independence. Now, Tracy's been featured in Oprah magazine during her adventure as quest for the gold athlete who competed in the World Cup Olympic class sailing. She was Thrive magazine's cover girl. She has climbed mountains in Nepal, captained 100 10-foot tall ships in the Eastern Atlantic Ocean. She's won a bronze medal in para-alpine skiing trial and has worked as a corporate consultant while at Air Canada and Shoppers Drug Mart, which are two of Canada's largest and most recognized brands. By the way, I should mention that Tracy was born a 4-way amputee. Yeah, so in other words, Tracy does not have any fully formed arms or legs. Try to keep that in mind as you hear her speak, and then maybe ask yourself, what is it really that's holding you back? Some of the key things I took from my time with Tracy and it was difficult to choose because, as you're going to hear, she is an absolute dynamo. I loved this conversation. But some of the things that really stayed with me in the immediate time after talking to her, number one, just pack up and go to Miami. Now, it doesn't have to be to Miami. It doesn't have to be to go and try to get the attention of a coach and go sailing with him like the story that Tracy tells. But keep it in mind when you hear her tell this story, and you'll know it when you hear it, that we all have moments, I think, where we just feel called to do something or to stop doing something or to try to reach out to somebody or to challenge ourselves in some way. And all those excuses pile up. But Tracy, in her case, just piled everything into the car and went to Miami. So I think that's a powerful idea to keep in your mind. If your gut, your intuition is just pulling you forward, maybe you can say to yourself, just pack up and go. Just go to Miami. Number two, Tracy said, I don't hear no. I hear counteroffers. Maybe we can just leave this as, I don't hear no. And I'll leave it at that. Number three, being scared into being a Paralympian or really stepping into the life that she's leading now. She tells just a fascinating, fabulous story of being on an airplane, flying into Toronto back in the days of Hurricane, oh gosh, I already forgot which hurricane it was, but the hurricane years ago that flooded the subways in New York, and I'm embarrassed. I'll find that and post it in the blog, in the show notes of the blog. Anyway, during a Hurricane Sandy, that's what it was. So she was on an airplane during that, and she says it got really, really rough. And she was used to flights in turbulence from her time at Air Canada, but this particular flight scared her. And it scared her into realizing that tomorrow is not promised to us and that she had to get really in tune with the life that she wanted to live. It's a great story. Have an ear for that. So, all right, are you ready to feel unstoppable? That's how you're going to feel when you listen to this fabulous woman. Here is Unstoppable Tracy Schmitt on Journeys with the No Schedule Man. Tracy, when's the first time that you remember referring to yourself as unstoppable?
I was at a San Diego regatta, and I was really lucky that first day of the regatta that I got a bullet. I got a first place in sailing, is referred to as a bullet. And someone said, how did you end up here? I don't know who you are. I've never seen you at any one of these things. It was in the United States in San Diego, and Tracy from Toronto is how I was introducing myself before then. They're like, how did you get here? What did it involve? And I had been laid off on the Friday, and I was really bummed. I was really sad. And I'm such a believer in what you focus on grows. And I was really scared of being sad about losing my job, about being laid off. So I'm like, okay, what's going to cheer me up? I got to do something so that I focus on positive, because I didn't want to attract any more of this negative energy. And so I Googled sailing, because it was October and there was no sailing in Canada and there was no skiing in the States, and found this regatta last minute and jumped on a plane. I got laid off at 11:30 and I jumped on a plane at like 5:30. And I arrived and I landed. I didn't even know where this yacht club was. I told the taxi driver, he's like, where are you going? And I'm like, San Diego Yacht Club? Kind of like a best guess scenario. And it turns out it's where it was, and they were there. And I remember registering, and they said, I am so sorry. There are no more spots available. And for a minute, my heart dropped. I'm like, no. And the guy behind me said, oh, my friend's not well. He can't sail. She can have his spot. And the lady behind the counter, she was sort of like, well, you got to plan these things. You can't just show up. She says she doesn't even have a boat. She's from Canada. She just flew in, unregistered. And he said, it's okay. He says, I brought my friend's boat. She can sail his boat. And so I didn't have the heart to tell him that I hadn't ever really sailed that kind of boat before. But I figured It had a mainsail, it had a jib, it had a tiller, and I spent the weekend training with a great coach, Betsy Allison, U.S. Paralympic coach, and she was doing a little bit of coaching for some local up-and-comers, like some American up-and-comers, and allowed me to join their training camp over the weekend. And then that Monday, I got that first place. So I knew how to sail, but I didn't really know how to race and how starting guns went and all of those bits and pieces. And when they found out my story, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're like unstoppable."
And it stuck.
And it stuck. Well, and it goes on from there. I can share the second part of that story one day or even now if you want.
Well, we're going to get into it. Let me get some context to this, Tracy. When was that trip to San Diego?
I believe it was 2010, October 2010.
So you had been referring to yourself as Tracy from Toronto pretty much prior to that?
Well, not even. Like everybody in San Diego are like, "Who are you? Where are you from?" And they're all picturing like another state in the U.S.
Yeah.
So I just got to this place where instead of explaining myself, I just kept saying, "Oh, I'm Tracy from Toronto." They're super friendly bunch, really welcoming, and they knew I was a new face on the scene. So I just very quickly became Tracy from Toronto. The U.S. Paralympic coach, she nicknamed me T squared. So, I'm unstoppable, Tracy, but I'm also T squared by fellow racers in that Paralympic American community.
We definitely will go back and give some context to some of the backstory leading up to that. But let's continue on what you had just mentioned about that word unstoppable comes to light. What then is the rest of the story in terms of how you recognize that as a great way to be able to apply that to your journey? What'd that look like?
Well, so I was so motivated after that particular regatta when I flew back to Canada on that, I was home around flying back 5:30. It was during Hurricane Sandy. And Hurricane Sandy, some people may know or remember that it hit the United States and devastated sort of New York, and many of the homes in Rhode Island were ruined. Like the New York subways were flooded. And I happened to be in the air flying back to Toronto when that hurricane hit. Because I'd worked for Air Canada in management and career development, facilitated a long time, I wasn't afraid of the turbulent flight. But when we were landing, it was very scary. And I still didn't have any doubts as a trainer for Air Canada. I knew we were pretty safe. But then it went very scary. And no one was allowed out of their seats, but a gentleman decided to stand up, maybe in fear, I don't know. But he got up and he got thrown, 6-foot-tall man got thrown across the aisle. And it just made for a very scary moment. And I kind of felt bad because on the Friday I had been laid off. And what do? Is I go and I spend some money and I fly somewhere else and do this regatta. So I was saying to, my universe, my God, I promise to stop horsing around. If I live, I'll crack down and I'll find myself a proper job. And the plane went really, really tumultuous. And so I'm like, forget that. If I'm going to die, I want to live for what I want to live for. And I realized that was to pursue my Paralympic dream. And then the plane totally leveled off and landed seconds later, like literally seconds later. And it was sort of like, I took that to mean it was a sign that I had to pursue this. And so at like 7:30 at night, I'm figuring out who are the Canadian Paralympians and phoning them and asking them, what's it going to take? How do I get involved? How do I train? What do I need to do? And they were telling me, they're like, Tracy, it's so great that you did well in San Diego at this national regatta for the States. So, but it would take 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with a Paralympic coach. You'd have to be on the team already practically. And then they said, in fact, you'd have to be with like a gold Olympian because you've just got so much catch up to do. This is a lifetime goal. And they said, it's very admirable, but probably not possible. And so I thanked them for their advice and I hung up. and I figured out and I said, do we know any gold Olympians in North America, in Canada? And they're like, there's none in Canada, but there's one in, Miami, Florida, named Magnus Lidgedal. And they said, but he's swamped with real gold Olympians and other Paralympians. You have to earn a reputation with him to get any time because he's so swamped. So I thanked them. I hung up. I found him, and I emailed him, and I phoned him, and I texted him, and I Facebooked him, and I LinkedIn him, and he never replied to any of it. So I got on Kijiji, and I tried to figure out, maybe I post my bed or my dresser, and I'm figuring stuff out, and I decide I'm going to go. And my sister comes, and she visits me in my basement apartment because I've been laid off, and then I took off to San Diego, and she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm going to Miami, Florida. And she was, I think she's an amazing sister. She's unbelievably supportive to this day. But she was really worried about me. And I think she thought I was pretty out of my rocker to head off, unemployed and just take off to the States. And every person I talked to, all my friends, all my family, nobody was really supportive of me going down to the States, not even the other Canadian athletes that are used to taking risk, right? But I just knew I had to do this. And so what didn't fit in my car didn't come with me. And I arranged it so that whatever rent I had owed and any debt, gave that to my sister to take care of so I wasn't leaving anybody in the lurch for money. And so I took off with pretty much no money because all my savings were going to the next 12 months rent. And every day I tried to reach out to Magnus and no reply. It took me several days. It was about 9 days after being laid off, and still nothing from Magnus. I got to Jacksonville, Florida, and he finally replied to one of my messages on Facebook, and he said, if you come, we got boats. And I showed up, that's all he said. I showed up the next day. He wasn't even in town. And so I slept in the parking lot. I hid my car between a couple of really big boats because rooms were like $240 in American in Miami, Florida. And I found him the next day washing a boat, and he was super busy. So I picked up a sponge and I washed the boat with him. And basically for 3 months, I washed boats for him. I did invoices for him. I ran and bought him lunch every day. And I just did whatever errands and favors I could do. And not once for 3 months did I get to sail with Magnus Lidgedal. And then finally, I got to sail, right? I was always the first one on the dock. I was always the last one off the dock. And that's pretty much because I spent a lot of time living on the dock, living in my car or living on boats where people let me sleep on their boat. I just stayed there, and I was first one there, last one home because that's where I was sleeping. And so created this impression with Magnus and everybody and all the other coaches from all around the world. A lot of people train out of Miami, Florida. There's a U.S. Paralympic Center. So all these international folks, these coaches would be there before their athletes. And so if I was there and their athlete wasn't there, they were kind enough to give me some coaching and help me with rigging. And I just got a lot of incredible support just because I was always there, always helping, always washing boats, and just being available for whatever coaching I could get. And when no one was using me, Magnus would exchange invoicing time and help time for borrowing his boat. So I would work for him for free, and he would loan me his boats for free. And it's kind of where it started. And then one day there was a regatta, and Magnus had boats. And he wrote, and I said, I got to go to this boat. I got to figure out how to get a boat. And he took a marker, and he wrote on the side of one of his boats, and he wrote Unstoppable Tracy right on his own boat, one of his boats. And he said, there, you got yourself a boat. And so me and Magnus have been like brother and sister ever since. And when he found out that I was mostly living out of my car, and he moved me into his girlfriend's studio. There was a room at the back of his studio. And it's been amazing. And I made it to Paralympic trials as a result of what everybody said was going to be impossible.
You said earlier, Tracy, about how, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you would always focus on the positive things. And then you've gone on to describe an unstoppable, I might even say relentlessly positive spirit focused on possibility. What I'm getting at is I'm wondering how that intuitive sense to not take no for an answer, when your intuition tells you that you're on the right track, how do you think that sense of focusing on positivity and possibility came to you? Where did it come from?
I think it just really starts with being like every other kid, right? I'm on my front lawn and the kids are all playing on the street, right? And they're all doing hide and seek or whatever they're doing, riding their bikes. And I just want to play too, right? And when it came time to go to school, I just want to go to the same school that all my neighborhood friends want to go to. So, just like any other kid does whatever it takes because they want to play, so they figure out how they're going to go play too, right? They're going to go lingo or introduce themselves if they're outgoing enough, or if they're shy, they're even just going to be nearby and watch, right? Like they just get there. And so it happens. And so I had to figure out how to make that happen. So I think I'm really lucky as a four-way amputee because I learned, even without any kind of consciousness to it, that I just had to be there. I just wanted to play too. And when I was going to kindergarten, the education system told my mom that myself as a four-way amputee, your listeners here may or may not know, I was born a four-way amputee. They don't know why. It's just a fluke. All my, my great-great-great-grandparents, all the way back, no one else has missing limbs, and none of my family since, none of the kids born since me. Just a fluke. And my mom is cheeky enough to say I'm a fluke in more ways than one. But, they told my mom that as a four-way amputee that I wasn't going to be able to go to the same kindergarten class as all of my neighborhood friends. And she said, well, how come? And they said, well, there's only one teacher and there's 30 kids. And I was born at a time when they didn't have educational assistants or the personal support workers in the classroom. And they said, Tracy's got to be able to tie her shoelaces, and she's got to be able to go to the bathroom by herself. She's got to get out to recess by herself. And the one teacher can't support Tracy as a four-way amputee and all 30 other kids. And as a teacher now, I kind of get that. Like, it's really, even with educational assistants, it's a lot to juggle a whole room full of kids and still manage Tracy with a disability. But my mom knew that I could do those things. But she knew that they were afraid that I might be a burden on the classroom. So what my mom did was she counteroffered. And she said, Tracy can do those things. Why don't we try Tracy just for 1 week? And we'll just try it. And then if it doesn't work out, then we give it a go somewhere else. And so that first day of school, my mom, she gets on her knees and she holds my arms by my shoulders, both hands. It's my earliest memory. I can still remember her fingers in my arms, clenching my arms so tight. I don't think she meant to be so gripping, but she was very, very passionate when she was holding me. She's like, Tracy, it's really important that everybody gets outside for recess together, including you. I'm like, okay, Mom. So I work out at Variety Village, and my grade 5 teacher works out there. I bumped into him now, over 30 years later. I guess over 40 years later, kind of embarrassing, over 40 years later. And he told me this story just a couple years ago that the principal told him. And he said that the principal went outside at recess time to see if I made it. And I wasn't there. And he waited and he waited. and his heart dropped at the 15-minute bell because I never made it outside when the 15-minute bell went off. And so what happened, they didn't know. So my principal was really worried about what my mom was going to feel at 3 o'clock when she got back. So he raced to meet my mom, and the both of them were like, Tracy, what happened? Did you make it outside for recess? And I wouldn't even answer because I promised my mom that I would go outside for recess with everybody. And so the principal answered for me, and he said, "You didn't make it outside, did you, Trace?" And I said, "No, I didn't make it outside." And so they went over to my teacher, and they asked my teacher, "What happened, Trace?" And "What happened, teacher?" Not "What happened, Trace?" They said, "Teacher, what happened?" And the teacher said, "Well, Tracy got ready in record time, tied her own shoelaces, had her coat on. She was the first kid in the class." And they're like, "Well, what happened?" And they said, "Well, her little friend couldn't tie her shoelace. So when Tracy tied her shoelace, none of the kids could tie their shoelace. And Tracy was bound and determined that everybody was included at recess. So she wouldn't go outside until she tied everybody's shoelaces. And by the time she'd done that, the recess bell was over." And it's so wacky, right? Like I was the only kid in that class without hands that was required to tie her shoelaces. And it doesn't make sense, you know, but I just wanted to be there. And so be it. And so what's so great is, you know, whatever you want, you go after. And if they tell you no, you respect no and you listen. But my mom taught me to counteroffer the no, and hear what it is that's causing people a concern. And I really kind of digested that in a 5-year-old kind of way. And I think it's just been subconsciously ingrained in me. So I don't hear no, I hear counteroffers. And I know that if you are diligent, it always comes around to working out. So I was really lucky to learn that early on.
Tracy, I'm going to ask what is, I hope is not an almost offensively simple question, but I bet people listening are wondering the answer to it. How do you tie shoelaces with no hands?
Well, this is where a podcast is extra tricky. I'd love to just demonstrate.
Yeah, let's see what you can do. I bet you'll.
I can do.
Yeah, I bet you'll counteroffer that challenge.
So my left arm is above elbow. I have a stump that isn't off at my shoulder. It goes to my elbow. And then on my right arm, the bones are a little bit of a different structure, and I actually have one finger of that sort of shortened arm with one finger. So I don't have a hand on the right side, but I do have one finger. And so I with my one finger, I make a loop, and I put my stump short arm on top of that loop. And then with my one finger, I wrap it around the loop. And I take the very tip of my finger and I shove the next loop through that wrap. And now with the wrap around, I put my little stump arm on the one loop that I made first. And I take my one finger and I grab that second loop and give it a tug. And that's how I tie my shoelaces. And as an objective listener, please feel free to probe further in that unusual first time ever description of tying shoelaces.
What are some of the things that I was going to ask are particularly challenging? I don't want to ask that. Maybe I'll put it this way, Tracy. Things that maybe that you figured out how to do that other people are most commonly astounded by, if you catch my meaning. You know, like you talked about tying your shoes, and I'm thinking, well, how does she do that? But so many other routine things that I wouldn't even bat an eyelash at. My subconscious is running that show. I don't even think about it. You probably would have had to engineer some sort of a process to do a lot of those things as well. What are some of the things that come to mind where people ask the question that I just asked you, like, how do you do that?
How do you, and I mean, I think there's a really great advantage to being born this way, right? No child knows how to eat or brush their hair, and they struggle at it at first and they figure it out. So, I just figured it out as a kid pretty early on. And my challenge with every day doesn't come from being a child or in school. I was never bullied. It comes now as an adult because people try to figure it out for me. Like just this week even, I had a wonderful experience learning how to ride a horse. And right away, they wanted to figure out how to adapt the reins. And I was asking, can you just say what I need to do? Like I didn't know when you turn left or right, you actually pull the rein towards your hip. Whereas I was, with my one finger, I was pulling it up in the air. And so then they wanted to tie in a harness, and they wanted to add a loop and a loop, and they wanted to do a fancy contraption that some other one-handed horseback rider does. And I'm like, I get all these great adaptations, and I want to go there. But before I go there, can I just know what is it I need to do? Like no one would tell me that I needed to pull it to my hip yet. And it took 2 or 3 times. Yes, but what's my end goal? Because when they tied a loop in it, it was too short for my left stump arm to reach. And I'm like, can you just tell me what we need to do? And this is just one example of every day of my life. For driving, for flipping flip chart paper at work, for using chopsticks in eating sushi. I can use chopsticks, all of these things. People want to adapt and engineer for me. And I was born this way. And so I've been doing this all my life. You just tell me what I need to do, I will do it. But I need to know the action. So it's hard when I don't know how to drive or I don't know how to use a horse. And they finally, after like 5 times, they finally told me, well, the action we're replicating is you've got to pull the rein towards your hip, not up in the air. So it wasn't that I couldn't do that. It was just that I didn't know how. And so when they told me that, it was, I held the reins underneath my short stump arm. And with my right finger, I pulled it towards my right hip. And when I needed to turn left, I pulled the rein towards my left hip. And, the same with driving. Once I knew what I needed to do, at 16, they wanted to charge me $60,000 and they wanted me to buy a fancy, expensive $60,000 minivan, which I couldn't do at 16. So it wasn't until I was 30 and I had a full-time job with Air Canada and benefits that I'm like, okay, I can afford to lease or finance this and figure out how to pay for this $120,000 vehicle to be an independent driver. And they finally told me what we needed to do. And I'm like, well, I use a mouse with my left stump arm, and that frees up my finger to type. And so they have a standard hand control for driving the gas and the brake. There's a pull from the gas and there's a pull from the brake, and it connects to one unit for the hand control. It's off the shelf. Anybody can buy it, $750. And I'm like, so if we just, instead of trying to figure out how my right arm's going to drive the gas and the brakes because I have a long arm, and then how do I steer and use lights and press the horn with my head and my nose and my mouth and all these fancy $60,000 adaptions, if I just do the gas and the brakes with a cup for my stump arm like I do with a computer mouse, my right long arm is free to steer the car, to press the horn, to put on the signal. And, I've been driving now for 15 years and I can do all of those things. And there's no adaptation on my wheel. There's no need for it. I've had a tire blow and I controlled the car, so, I've never ever caused any accidents. I've been rear-ended, but I've never at a stopped light. I was rear-ended, not because I did anything funny. So I've been, touch wood, really lucky. But I drive very safely with my one finger and no other adaptations besides a $750 hand control and a cup. And I figured that out because I use a mouse with my left stump arm. Or when I started skiing, how am I going to ski? And I don't have mega dollars being born this way. When you acquire an injury, sometimes you have insurance. Or sometimes, if you're a war veteran, and we honor those that are injured fighting for our country, like in the Invictus Games. But there's support for those guys to get their walking leg and to get their sports leg and to get their swimming leg and to get their running leg, and they can have multiple recreational devices. I can't even get a computer knee for my legs. I'm allowed the basic legs for 75% funding, and that's it. So I don't have funds for ski legs. So what we did is we got men's ski boots backwards, and we just stuffed my thighs, both my legs and above my knees, and I have stumps to my knees. So we just put my women's thighs into these, and so that's why we did men's boots, because they were the largest we could find, big enough for my thighs. And we just ratcheted my thighs into men's boots, and I don't have toes. And by going backwards, it put me in that duck squat skiing position. And so, whatever I want to do, I'm never worried. Other people are worried, but I'm never worried about how I'm going to do it. I know I can drive. I know I can ski. I know I can eat and use chopsticks in a sushi restaurant. I know I can brush my teeth and floss my teeth. I just need the dentist and the driver education and the ski club to believe I'm capable. And I know that we'll figure it out once I'm in the door. But now that I'm older, it's just like, and now that there's much more regulation and standard operating procedures and all this awareness to it all, like even riding the horse, I don't know if everybody has to. And I'm so lucky. And I loved my day at Windreach riding that horse. It was amazing. And they spoiled me beyond belief. And someone named Monica got super motivated when she saw me coming to ride a horse. And she saw the cup I had on my hand controls in my car. And she got her engineering roommate to make a cup on a tandem bicycle for my stump arm. And so not only did I get to ride a horse for a first time this week, I got to ride a tandem bicycle for the first time this week with a cup on her steering, on her handlebar. And she got me this rest for the archery because she didn't think I'd be able to hold it with one arm. So I got to try archery. And the first time I tried it with the stand. And I said, with your permission, can I try holding it without the stand? And she's like, yeah, here's the safety lock on. Let's try it. And my little stump arm can hold and brace the target. And a few people had tried it before me, and none of them got the target. Whereas with my stump arm and my finger, I got the target. I got the archery target my first try, balancing it with a tiny little stump arm. Like, people just don't get how strong this stump arm is. It's best for sailing. It's best for driving a car. It's best for holding an archery gun, And everybody wants to figure out what to do with my long right arm, rather than just say, this is how the archery works, or this is how driving the horse works, or this is how driving a car works. This is the gas pedal, and this is the brake. And let me be part of my own personal problem solving. And, nothing about us without us. Let us be part of that conversation and not jump straight to expensive adaptions. And because I learned to ski with the backwards boots and the duck's position, and it's great. And I tell you, nothing to do with the backwards boots, just like everybody, I skied into the trees 12 times my first time. And it was a great, soft, fluffy snow landing. It sounds scary, but it was perfect. It was very well padded. But, by Friday, once I learned how to turn, I didn't ski in the trees anymore, like 5 days of practice. And when I started to sail, now I'm this World Cup sailor, and I sail in World Cup regattas against able-bodied men. Sailing is predominated by men, and the boats that I raced also included able-bodied Olympic sailors. And so I'm the girl that my first summer, I fell out of the boat. I spent more time swimming with the fish than I did because I didn't know how to balance in the boat without legs on. So I needed an extra summer to learn how to balance. But it doesn't mean that I wasn't going to be successful. And so that's all I need is, it's weird how to figure out how to eat or how to brush my hair or how to do mascara. I wear liquid eyeliner. And one of the things that women always ask me is, how do you get that eyeliner so perfect? I can barely get it on straight. And I say, well, they've got excess appendages in the way. It's much easier with one finger.
When you said a few minutes ago something to the effect of every single day you get it, where it's the adults that maybe pose these challenges, that they want to figure it out for you. I'm wondering how because what I immediately thought there, Tracy, was that old movie Groundhog Day, where the main character wakes up and every day it's always the same. And I'm wondering how you continue to face that, well-meaning as I'm sure most people are,
Yes.
but that you have to continue to reset and kind of do, okay, we'll do this again, and I'll show them day after day after day, after all these years, without letting that wear down your spirit.
Well, I think it was certainly more frustrating as a teenager because all teenagers, right? You're breaking out of this agreeable, you want to be like everybody as a kid and supported. And then you, like, as teenagers, people break into, I'm independent. I am old enough to do this now. I can drive this car before they have their first accident, right? And the overconfident and enthusiastic beginners of everything because they don't know what they don't know, right? And until something in life is sort of that disillusioned learner stage where the reality of how hard it is to merge on a highway or parallel park, for example, those things happen. So like every teenager, I just also had the added component of having a disability. And so not wanting to be told no or not wanting to be told how to do things, that on top of driving, it also came to my everyday life as a person with a disability. And I don't know that I was as patient as I am today, but you learn how to be more effective at being more influential and more persuasive, right? And I learn, like, if I really listen, so what is stopping them? What's their obstacle? And what's really great is as I learned what helped, like I went to many, many jobs at 16 and friends were working at McDonald's and Tim Hortons and bowling alleys and trying to get their first job around 15, 16 or so. And I was getting turned down and no one was hiring me. And then just by coincidence, there was something in an office at State Farm Insurance when I went for the interview. And I ended up in this interview talking about the fact that I was a downhill skier. And they're like, really? What kind of runs do you do? And I'm like, I love moguls, right? They're my favorite. Because and it sounds crazy, but the moguls almost like helped give me the pivot turn, right? They helped throw me into the next turn. Moguls help me ski, and the speed helps me ski rather than, a really flat, basic beginner run. You give me some pitch and the forward momentum, and I work it with my body. And so I kind of went into that space. And they hired me, and my job was answering telephones. And no one was hiring me before that. And I don't know what downhill double black diamond moguls have to do with answering telephones, but they could see that I was capable. If I could ski double black diamond moguls, then obviously I could answer a telephone. And so and while I was there, I saw a massive turnover, many, many people being hired and over telephones, and I was super loyal and I had great problem solving for a 16-year-old. A lot of people at 16 thought that I was a really old, mature personality for 16. Now I'm in my 40s. They think I have a very immature and young personality for my 40s, but I was always accused of being old in my teens. And I think it's you realize you get more flies with, you get more bees with honey. I don't want what the flies attract. I get more bees with honey, and you listen. And what is the obstacle that people are looking at you with? And so how can you listen and counter offer in a way that causes a faster transition to seeing that I'm capable? And like with Magnus in Miami, Florida, is, I'm not just another sweet person with a disability that wants to try something, and then once they've done it, the photograph is over and they're gone, right? I proved by sticking around for 3 months, and it isn't all about me, Unstoppable Tracy, right? It's about Magnus. He's running a Team Paradise, which is a bigger club that impacts many sailors around the world. Gold Olympians, gold Paralympians, up-and-comers, aspiring Paralympic athletes. And so what difference can I make as well? Like, how can we equally be valuable contributors? What can I do for Windreach? And what can I do for, these other places. And, the one place that never, ever made me prove anything was March of Dimes. March of Dimes, once they were involved at 30, when I'm like, look, I think I can drive this and I got them involved when I was trying to get driving assessed and trying to prove what I could do. And can I be part of this problem-solving conversation? March of Dimes believed in me. And March of Dimes ran recreational programs that were, inclusive. It wasn't just all people. And if that was what you needed, that was great. So there was recreation for people specifically who had disabilities, and everybody went. Or there was trips, which they still offer to this day, recreational opportunities where you travel, and it happens to be that a couple people with a disability might go too. And that's where I went to Nepal, and I sailed on a tall ship in Holland in the North Sea, and I went to the Grand Canyon with March of Dimes. And March of Dimes got me driving, and March of Dimes brought someone in my home that was going to listen to what I needed. I didn't want a commode chair. I wanted a stool that when my legs were off, I could climb on the toilet, and when my legs were on, that the armrest was in a position that I could sit and stand really easy. And I wanted the stool to look like a nice piece of furniture, not some white plastic hospital adaptive aid. And March of Dimes sent me an engineer through one of their many programs to do that. And I'm born this way, so I don't have the funding. But when I wanted to do some rough terrain over a long distance, March of Dimes had a loan cupboard for an all-terrain wheelchair. So, March of Dimes just always listened and just provided me what I was asking for. And if they couldn't, they connect me with people that can. And it's very rare. Very, very rare for me. And now I'm so lucky to be, a spokesperson for Variety Village, and a spokesperson for March of Dimes, and a spokesperson for Reach for the Rainbow that provides camp for kids with disabilities, a spokesperson for Rick Hansen Foundation that says, how can I be included in playing on the playground if I'm not able to access that playground? And I'm on a committee with the Toronto Police for vulnerable persons to advocate that people with disabilities are capable. And the police are doing phenomenal jobs at really increasing their quality of training so that they believe everybody's capable when they're doing their regular police services for the community. And people with disabilities can get arrested too. We're human. We're happy, healthy go-getters, and some of us have chips on our shoulder,
You mentioned March of Dimes. I'm glad you did. That's an organization with which I've become rather familiar over the last 4 or 5 years. Been very honored and privileged to become involved and volunteer my time as a host and MC and speaker and just be part of some things here in London. And I'm thrilled that I'm actually going to get to share company with you just coming up ahead of the time that we're actually recording this, where you're going to be keynoting at a couple of events called Opening Doors for Accessibility. And I'm going to use that as a jumping off point for this next big, broad, somewhat unfair, but I know you're going to dive right into it anyway, question, which is the process that led you to where I perceive that you are now, speaking internationally and an author and all of the other. I mean, I could mention all the different accolades and accomplishments, but then you wouldn't have any more time to speak in this episode. But you talked about having been laid off in some of your initial jobs. I know that you'd worked at large Canadian companies like Shoppers Drug Mart. You mentioned Air Canada. Yeah. What was the evolution from the time maybe where you were wrecking around with Magnus in Miami to becoming somebody that passionately shares her message as a speaker internationally, writing books, and the unstoppable Tracy that is talking with me here today? How'd that happen?
Well, I think everybody should take risks, and because you don't know unless you try, right? And for me, recreation has always been that first chance where I could take a risk and I could figure out, how do I know unless I try? And so all these recreational opportunities, sailing and skiing and all these incredible journeys, outward bound, climbing, with Outward Bound in Thunder Bay, and then climbing in the Himalayas of Nepal, right? Everything just always got bigger, falling out of a boat in Lake Ontario to World Cup sailor. Like every journey started with just getting started. I don't know how, but you just get started. And recreational opportunities was a really great way to do that. And, you know, pursuing my Paralympic journey to find Magnus and to win Magnus's trust and coaching along that way, it got me to the Paralympic trials, which was incredible, but it didn't get me into the Paralympics. I didn't become a Paralympian. And that, again, was heartbreaking. And trying to figure out, what am I going to focus on so that the positive is what grows, not focusing on disappointment so that more disappointment grows, you know? And so what I realized in that journey of, like, what did I love about my first saving grace from being laid off and being sad was sailing, and sailing all my life. You know, the first time me and my first love broke up, you know, sailing was my go-to, and losing my job, sailing was my go-to. And so sailing's always been my go-to. So when I didn't get the Paralympic trials, it was even harder to figure out what's my go-to, what makes me happy, because I didn't make Rio. I didn't make that happen. And it took me a while. It took me more months than anything else ever did. And then I realized, like, what made me happy was speaking. Like, when I was celebrating my journey in my attempts to get to my Paralympic trials, part of that journey was speaking and motivating others with the intention of trying to fundraise for my boat, trying to get myself a boat to go to the trials. And I really loved that just as much as sailing, and in some ways even more. And then Para-Pan Am Games came to Toronto 2015, and I got hired as planning and integration manager. So I supported the Pan Am Games, and I supported the Para-Pan Am Games in all of the areas, transportation and IT and HR and all of the areas. There's 55 functional areas that are involved, but, you know, overlay, like, which are the drawings for the sites, and 55 visits of the venues to do accessibility audits. But I also did 55 speaking events in 6 months, on top of all my other responsibilities with the Pan Am Para-Pan Am Games as planning and integration manager. And I loved those 55 presentations, and I loved doing the accessibility audits. And all my life, I kind of had resisted the accessibility world in some ways. But I had all these skills. I knew building code, and I knew representing March of Dimes, Easter Seals, Variety Village. Like, I knew very diverse populations for people with disabilities, not just mobility impairments, but people with vision loss, and people with hearing loss, and people with intellectual impairments, and people working on mental wellness, and all these areas. And so I did someone who had seen me at the Pan Am Para-Pan Am Games and knew my journey as a Paralympic trialist. I worked that into my story to help Toronto 2015 celebrate and build brand awareness. They invited me back in January, and someone in the audience said, where's your book? And that had come up a lot over the 55 presentations I did. Where's your book? And I'm like, oh, I'm not a writer. I don't like writing. I like being out on the water, right? And then it came up again. And then the JT Fox organization, they had a free mega speaker event, and they coached me on a high performance level, like with my sailing and my skiing. You want to become an entrepreneur? Because I wasn't getting hired because I'm a person with a disability. Even though I had an MBA, no one was hiring me. People would hire me for a $30,000 job, but no one was hiring me for an $80,000 to $100,000 job. And so this JT Fox organization said, write a book, and that's a start for your entrepreneurial business in speaking. And then Jerry Roberts taught me, and I invested my savings for a house. I invested my savings for a house into writing a book. And so every single penny this year has gone into writing a book and getting high performance coaching for business. just like I did for sailing and skiing. And so it's really taken off. And as a result now, I just got back from Thailand. Next week, I'm going to Sochi, Russia. And in November, I'm sharing the stage at several different events. One with Jane Fonda, one with Mel Gibson, one with Al Pacino, and Sochi, Russia in October, right? And all those celebrity events are in LA. And so it really is, when you focus on what you want to do and you focus at who you surround yourself with. You focus yourself with people that are motivated and driven, and that's contagious. Surround yourself with others with the kinds of goals and like-minded mindset that you want to have. And it really works. And I never did that in my personal life. I only did it in my sport life. And it really helped me with speaking.
You started to touch on what I was going to ask you to start to wrap up the conversation, which is with all of these adventures that you know that your life is a movie, right, Tracy, by the way? That's another thing that probably has occurred and been said to you that we can file away, but that wasn't the question.
That's never been said to me. That's very nice of you to say. But that's funny. See the book, and now you're saying movie. So it's always the next adventure. Something bigger always happens when you take on something bigger than you imagined.
Have you ever seen what's it called, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty?
No.
Oh, Tracy, Walter Mitty wants to be you. Go. It's got Ben Stiller in it. It's throw it on your list for when you're on the airplane over to Sochi or something like that. Sure. But a character that just is caught in this mundane life and dreams about climbing mountains and living life and doing all the things that Unstoppable Tracy does. But here was the question that I was going to get to was, what's out there that's on your list in your dreaming mind of someday I'm going to do X?
I would love to be the female speaker who has a disability that's like equivalent to Tony Robbins. In the States, there's a male four-way amputee named Nick Vujicic, and Nick is he's international, but he's really well known in the U.S. I would like to be the Canadian female international speaker that's the equivalent of Tony Robbins one day. I would love to be on a stage as big as Tony Robbins' stage. Because what really fills my soul is not Unstoppable Tracy. All my life I've been pursuing mountains and pursuing sailing in an extreme level and pursuing skiing in an extreme way. And now I've just finished doing my advanced scuba diving. I'm going to Bonaire in January for my advanced scuba diving final open water test. And everything I take to the extreme level, and it's like I've been searching. And I really feel like I might have found what I've been looking for, and that is Unstoppable You, right? I want to be on a big stage because I feel like the Unstoppable You, all these people that say, oh my gosh, after I talked to you, I went and I pushed my book to a publisher that I never ever shared with anybody. And after I talked to you, I looked up my teenager who I'd lost contact with 20 years ago. Or because of you, I decided to not commit suicide. You wouldn't believe the magical, heartfelt stories that people are sharing with me. And all I'm talking about is wiping out in the trees when I go skiing. But it causes people to reflect back. And that's really soul-filling. And I think I've been searching for the wrong thing with all these adventures. I feel like Unstoppable You, the world, is why I was on this planet, why I was made this way as a person with a disability. And so how come I'm searching for a big Tony Robbins stage? Because I want to make a big impact in a big way so that everybody gets to be, what was his name? Mitzi?
Walter Mitty is the name of the film.
Walter Mitty.
Yeah.
I want everybody to be Walter Mitty. I want us all to be Walter Mitty.
As I'm listening to you talk, Tracy, I'm thinking about, and I hope this comes across in the way that I'm intending it, but that a spirit and a soul probably has no face, no arms, no legs.
Ah.
And that's the part that I think I was 4 decades late to the party almost in terms of tuning into the sort of spirit that you're describing. And it astounds me the people that do get put across your path when you stop listening to these self-limiting excuses and ideas and start just driving toward Miami, so to speak. That these angels just get dropped in front of you. And I can't wait for you and I to share the same space in coming up in Ottawa and Toronto. And I look forward to being there just screaming my frigging lungs out in a giant arena when you hit the stage in your own Tony Robbins-esque presentation, because I have absolutely no doubt that you're going to get there. And you don't need anybody like me or anybody else to tell you how to do it. We're all going to be asking you, how did you do it? And I just think it's awesome, and I congratulate you on the work that you're doing. Thank you for sharing this time with me.
Thank you, Kevin. Oh my gosh. That's very, very thoughtful. And there's so many wonderful people like you on my journey, right? March of Dimes is inviting me into this next big dream yet again for this wonderful stage opportunity. And I'm so glad I get to give you a great big hello. I feel so close to you now, even though we haven't met face to face.
Well, we'll remedy that soon, Tracy. I wish we had more time. I know we're both real busy, but I suspect this will not be our last conversation. But thanks again for sharing this time. It's a gift to anybody who invests in themselves enough to have listened to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
To connect with Tracy, you can visit her online at unstoppabletracy.com. Now, Tracy is Tracy. There's no E or I or anything like that in there. So just all one word, unstoppabletracy.com. Tracy is Tracy. On Facebook, you can find her at facebook.com/tracy.schmitt. Her last name is Schmitt. You can follow her posts there. You can find her on LinkedIn. On Instagram, you can find her at Unstoppable Tracy. And Twitter, her handle is Unstoppable Trace. TRAC. Ran out of characters there, I think. So you can find her on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. But again, the best road to that, or to all of those channels, is her website, unstoppabletracy.com. From there, you can also find out about her book, Unstoppable You, Exceed Uncertainty, Embrace Possibilities, and Earn Independence. Now, if you liked Tracy's story, how could you not? You're probably going to enjoy these episodes. Episode 2 with my friend Mike Mulligan from Moving Forward Rehabilitation and Wellness Center. A fabulous story of wanting to be able to walk again after being paralyzed at age 16, and how that completely transformed his life and career and the contribution that he's making to others as part of that process. It's episode 2, way back at the beginning, and still one of the more inspiring and motivating episodes of this podcast. Episode 18 with Bruce Van Horn, we called it Life is a Marathon. Boy, has Bruce ever been faced with some challenges, and he just continues to find resourceful and positive and proactive solutions. A powerful story with Bruce Van Horn in episode 18. And episode 56, Susan Kovacs. Boy, she had some obstacles thrown in her way as well, and she just absolutely refused to let those slow her down. Listen for that. If you like Tracy, you're going to love Susan also. That's episode 56. You can find all those and all archived episodes of Journeys with the No Schedule Man on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Google Play Music in the U.S., and of course at noschedulemanpodcast.com. Love to hear from you. You can connect with me online on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. My handle on all of those platforms is No Schedule Man. And if you'd like to work with me personally, you can learn more about my speaking, workshops, seminars, one-on-one or group coaching opportunities. All of that information is at kevinbulmer.com. Hey, thanks so much for spending some time with me today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe and share. I'd love to have you here again next week as we explore another journey on Journeys with the No Schedule Man.
Just a little deja vu.